Jamie Goldstein,
Still present.
Christina Mowry,
Here.
Martine Bernal,
Here.
and Chair Jenny Haruna.
Here, thank you. All right, presentation, storyteller presentation.
I'd like Denise Fritsch and Judy Russell, who together run our volunteer program for the library, to come up and tell us about a new program in our community. Denise.
Good morning. We really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. Just a little very brief overview about the volunteer program. We have approximately 200 individuals from the community who volunteer all across the library system at our different branches, at events. As a matter of fact, we're going to have 2 volunteers help me cut cake tomorrow night at the big 150th. And together they donate about 11,000 hours of service to our libraries. And as Susan said, today we want to talk to you specifically about a new program that's near and dear to our hearts. So by the way, this is Judy Russell. I'm Denise Fritsch. About 2 years ago, Judy and I recognized that many prospective volunteers were sending in applications with a specific requirement that they really wanted to read to children. That seemed to be a prevalent theme that kept repeating itself. And at that time, we did not have that opportunity for community volunteers. Our librarians still to this day lead very successful story times at our branches. They conduct classroom tours. There was no opportunity for community members to read to children. So the question Judy and I asked ourselves was, what can we do? How can we facilitate an opportunity that would not only provide this outlet for our community members, but would also support the strategic plan of the library in community outreach and early literacy. So we came up with an idea actually born out of the fact that preschools in the area were not being addressed. We were not going out into the preschools. So we met with library leadership and the librarians and proposed the suggestion that we could train a cohort of individuals to go into the preschools and read to children. And from that, our Storytellers program was born. And now I'll turn it over to Judy.
So once we got the go-ahead, we were very excited. But the question was, how do we move forward with this? And so what we ended up finding out is that there was an existing program called Books for Wider Horizons. And this program's been running through the Oakland Public Library for over 20 plus, almost 25 years, where they were doing exactly what we wanted to do. They were training a cohort of volunteers who were going out, they were receiving 6 weeks of training to go out to Head Start centers and conduct training as volunteers. And so we gave them a phone call, and they invited us up, Denise and I, to go visit and see what they're doing and how they're doing it. And so that's what we did. We met with their dedicated volunteer who only oversees that program because it's just so huge and so valued by the community. And so we met with her. She showed us they actually have their own dedicated materials where they can check out puppets and books and everything that they need to really do their job well. They also have a training curriculum, a huge training curriculum, as I had said, about 6 weeks long. And they said, would you like to have this? We said yes. So we left that day very excited, recognizing that we had an entire curriculum to work with, and really getting a better grasp of what would that huge, amazing program look like in Santa Cruz. And so when we came back, we hit the ground running. We immediately went back to speak with the librarians about how do we get them trained in the training curriculum. And so Catherine Upton, who is a SCPL librarian, she took that curriculum and she consolidated it into 8 hours of training held over 2 weekends. We recruited and we identified 4 volunteers. And these volunteers, it's really great how they come from all different backgrounds, consisting from a retired school teacher, which is like a perfect fit. So we were like, okay, in. Another one is a retired NICU nurse. And another example was a current volunteer who was volunteering at the downtown library assisting with story times. And so we brought them in and had them trained. And so as volunteer coordinators with Denise and I, when we were asked to present this, our immediate question was, well, who can we get to do this for us? And so we have a volunteer now, our fourth volunteer storyteller, Gale Yamaguchi Gleason. And so Gale is a volunteer storyteller at St. Stephen's Lutheran Learning Center. And so we had identified that, and we have 2 preschools. The other one is the CKC preschool up at Santa Cruz Gardens. And Gale, her background is such that she is a former university instructor. She currently works part-time with not-for-profits, and she's a parent of a college student. And today, she's our model storyteller. So without further ado, Gale, it's all on you.
Thank you, no pressure at all. Good morning, everyone. My name is Gale Yamaguchi Gleason, and I've lived in Santa Cruz since 2001. I am a retired university instructor, and currently I work part-time for a nonprofit. I'm also an organizational consultant, and I'm an empty nester. So, about 1.5 years ago, I was reflecting on what I wanted more of in my life, and spending time with children came immediately to mind. Given the current state of our country, I realized I wanted to give some of my time and attention to young children, and I hoped that in return I would gain a regular reminder of the goodness of humanity in their wiggling bodies, excitement, and unabashed curiosity. I figured I could have contact with a broader range and diversity of kids through the public library. And when I checked out the volunteer page on the website, I thought, I have about 10,000 hours of reading stories and playing Legos with my son. I'll see if I can volunteer with one of those 2 things. So initially, I assisted with the Lego free play time at my neighborhood library, Branciforte. It was great fun. And then about 1 year ago, I was asked to be part of the New Storytellers pilot program. I thought I had died and gone to heaven. Pam, Freya, Mary, and I experienced a 2-day training with Catherine, an expert children's librarian, and the training was a great reminder of child development theory, how children acquire language skills, putting together a balanced and fun story time, and practicing slowly and animatedly reading stories aloud. I had forgotten how, so I had to remember. As a parent and educator, much of this rang a bell, and it was also a good reminder of what I had gotten myself into. The 4 of us newly trained storytellers paired off, and my partner Pam and I were assigned to St. Stephen's Child Development Center at St. Stephen's Lutheran Church up the street from Harbor High and not very far from where I live. Pam and I worked together on the first few story times, and then we started taking turns, alternating weeks. I'm not gonna lie, it was a lot of work, and it took me many hours to plan those first several story times. I joked with my husband, though, that my inner teacher was being well fed. I got to think up a theme for the day and find appropriate storybooks and songs without having to grade any papers. Then as I was leaving one day, I told the school director, Kathy, that I was thinking about a monster-themed story time. And I asked her if any of the children had issues with monsters, and she said, well, I don't know, but we'll find out. So I planned a full-on monster story time. There are so many great preschool monster storybooks at the library, so it was hard to choose. And my ulterior motive was to de-scarify monsters for these 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. Monsters are fun, silly, and pretend was my message. So the morning arrived. The first book I read was Monster Mess by Marjorie Kuehler. I highly recommend it. Each child could barely sit still, waiting to see what the next turn page would show. It was implied that a monster was making its way through a quiet house early one morning, picking up and straightening out the mess along the way. And about 3/4 of the way through the story, though, one little boy, who I will call Chad, hid his eyes. And we didn't see his eyes again until the story was over. I took the book over to Chad and I said to him, I want to show you how funny and silly this story ends. Uncover your eyes and take a look, Chad. And what he saw when he finally did unclench his fingers was another little boy in this story who was just waking up. And this boy was rolling on the floor and being tickled mercilessly by this playful blue many-legged monster friend. Monsters are funny, silly, and pretend, I repeated. One of my other favorite anecdotes is from my partner Pam, who is a retired neonatal intensive care unit nurse. We talk regularly about how the kids are and how they react to different books, songs, and activities. She said one day the children asked her, Miss Pam, do you and Miss Gale live at the library? Laughingly, she said no. But that's what they think because we wear our library volunteer name tags and we encourage them to visit the library with their family to get some good books, like we read to them each week. As a little girl, I was a voracious reader who visited the library at least once a week. My parents could not have afforded the numerous books I consumed. My sister and I were first in our family, sorry, a little emotional, to go to college, and I continued until I completed my PhD. Public libraries have helped feed my lifelong love of reading. I can't tell you how many times I practiced this yesterday, so I wouldn't do this. I just need to say. Public libraries have helped feed my lifelong love of reading and learning, and I hope to pass along this excitement for learning and love of books to all of the little eyes and ears at St. Stephen's Child Development Center. I am grateful for the opportunity to be a storyteller, bringing story time from the neighborhood library into a neighborhood preschool, and I look forward to seeing the children every other week, feeding my inner teacher and soaking up their innocence and their zest for life. I hadn't realized until writing this a couple of nights ago that the public library helped change my life, and I can only hope that some of what we do as storytellers will help change their lives too. Thank you.
I'd like to just unpack a couple things here. One, I think this, thank you, that was beautiful, and I'm actually glad we have it on tape.
I'm not.
I think it really demonstrates sort of the transformational nature of public libraries in our society, and I think you did that beautifully. The second thing I want to say is that making sure that children are ready for kindergarten is a really fundamental and important thing in what we do. And it's been really hard for us as an organization to do the kind of outreach that we want to do, especially since the cuts of 2013. So we have made it a very explicit organizational strategy to increase our organizational capacity by using volunteers. The amazing thing about the Santa Cruz community is we have incredible assets in our community. We have a lot of people retiring, school teachers, librarians, nurses, people from all, doctors, lawyers, psychiatrists. It's just amazing, the retirees in this community who really have an energy about giving back. I'll say that we are walking daintily into this. We recognize that we're a union environment and we need to be careful and clear about what volunteers do in our organization and about what our employees do. And I think something that's relatively new for us is a lot of our volunteers in the past have really done sort of that frontline entry-level work, and we are starting to open programs that really require sophisticated skill sets and knowledge. I think this is a good example. I think our programs working with people experiencing homelessness is another thing where the volunteers really need to have a skill set that's pretty sophisticated. And so we've piloted this. We started small, but I think you can see that it's going really well, and it's the kind of thing we'd really like to expand. It gives us potentially the opportunity to reach out to communities that we can't necessarily get in the library, some of our underrepresented communities. So we're really, really excited about the possibility. And I just want to say, we bring in puppies and story times, but there's a method to all of this that I think is really important to transforming the kinds of library we're going to be in the future. So thank you so much for your service.
You're welcome.
Are there any questions for Denise, Judy, or Gale?
No, I just want to say thank you. It's amazing to see just the level of devotion. Really, it's amazing. Thank you.
My name is Kira, and I'll just mention that my daughter is at the Santa Cruz Gardens campus, and she loves it. She is in love with the. I get emotional. But it's so enriching to hear her look forward to the stories and to know that my coworkers are providing that for her. It's so sweet when she talks to me about it. So thank you, and I hate you for being emotional.
It's so great to hear that it's going on.
Now you're gonna make us all cry here, so stop that.
I'm gonna share that with you. I appreciate that.
But what a great testament about how we can leverage our resources and use the community to build each other up. And Kira's story is just as emotional as Gale's. And Gale, thank you so much for your passion and for just investing in Santa Cruz and our children. I really appreciate it. And to you too, Judy and Denise, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes. This is very exciting stuff.
We're doubling our program next year. We're adding 2 new preschools.
Fantastic.
So we'll be up to 4.
All right, so you'll be back telling us where you guys are off to.
And
Looking
if you have
forward
any
to
great
it.
volunteers, send them our way. We're
All
always
right. Excellent. Thank you again for sharing. Okay, so that takes us to additional materials.
Can we just go straight to my performance review after that?
We can do that. There are none? Okay, great. And no additions or deletions to the agenda? Okay, that takes us to oral communications. Is there anyone that would like to approach the board? Okay, seeing none, we have a report by the library director.
The thing I just want to emphasize is Friday night is the 150th
right.
anniversary of the Santa Cruz Public Libraries. We would love for you to drop by. It's an open house. Just come for 10 minutes and have some cake. There is some amazing art. We have printmakers from around the community that are allowing us to show their art during this party, and a lot of them have library themes. I have to say, Fortitude and Patience are the library lions of the New York Public Library, and I do have Fortitude written on it. So my library theme tattoo. So I think you'll be awed by the artwork, and we're going to have a music and a celebration, so I hope you'll join us.
Any questions for Susan? Anyone want to comment
150th.
on this?
That's incredible. There's not a lot of communities in this country that can say that.
Especially on this side of the country.
I'm sorry?
On this side of the country especially.
Well, you know, I come from the Midwest, and no one can do that in the Midwest.
Okay, if there's no questions from the board, are there any questions from the public on this item? Okay, seeing none, moving to report by Friends of the Santa Cruz Public Library.
The Friends have exciting news.
I do. I have some exciting, very exciting news, but I'm going to start with important news. I left in front of everybody our last newsletter. We haven't seen each other for a while, so this is from October. And so the Monterey Peninsula Foundation has reached out to Susan and asked us, we did submit for a $400,000 grant for 3 branches, Garfield, La Selva Beach, and Boulder Creek. And they asked if we would resubmit it again when they had enough funds to say yes to it. They didn't say they're going to say yes, but they said that they would like us to resubmit it, and they want to do 3 branch site visits. So we're resubmitting that in January. One of the things that we're going into now is we're going to be talking to people at this very high-end levels. So they'll be asking if the Joint Powers Authority support the Friends in these efforts. You'll notice I left an envelope in the newsletter, which is for a donation. And another way you can support us, you can do that, or you can go to Santa Cruz Gives. We are fundraising there for all the STEAM programs in all the 10 branches. So that's my important news. Now the great, incredible news is we just received a gift of $650,000 for the Aptos Library. So I'll be talking to those donors to see exactly what they're interested in and maybe if they're interested in some recognition at that point. So yay, it comes from an estate, from Betty Leonard, who I guess used to go to the Aptos Library all the time. And I'll end with, we're having 2 holiday parties. La Selva Beach will have one on Saturday, you all are welcome. And next Friday will be one at Aptos Library. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions? All right, well, thank you so much.
Bye.
I want to acknowledge that both the Administrative Friends Group and the chapters are doing incredibly well. I think we're having success levels we've never seen before. We're really grateful for the community's love. But I also have to say that Measure S, I think, is really bringing back people into the library and thinking about sort of the legacy of the library in a way that we haven't seen in years. We're very excited about that. I know the Capitola campaign is going like gangbusters, and Felton as well. It's very impressive.
Well, Aptos just took a huge step there. It's terrific.
All right, is there anyone from the public that would like to comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, we have, comments by board members. Are there any comments? by
Oh, I'm
board
sorry. I
members?
have the advisory commission here.
Oh, I'm sorry, we'll skip that. Go back to report. Is there a report?
Yeah.
Great, sorry about that. That's fine. We do want to hear from you.
Well, I don't think I can make it wrong, but it's going to be hard to top that. I'm Martha Dexter, and I'm the chairman of the Library Advisory Commission. We've actually met twice since we reported to you last. At our August meeting, we had presentations on 2 of the 2018 innovation grants. One was on the Reach for the Stars project, which is a program to lend telescopes, and it's very exciting, and I understand it's almost too successful. It's more successful than they even imagined it would be. And then the other project we heard about was the SpringShare Systems project, which is 2 software programs. One, LibCal, helps with scheduling programs and allowing patrons to register online for programs, and the other one, LibAnswers, it provides a database of reference questions so that the reference librarians can track what they're doing and build a knowledge base. I just want to say these innovation grants are really exciting, and I think we were excited to hear about them. I think we really have to thank you guys for funding this project, and I think it's really brought a lot of enthusiasm to the staff, certainly that we saw, and to the community as well. At our November meeting, we had an extensive discussion on community-led programming, and this sort of follows a little bit what we heard about with the volunteer, the concept of community-led program. I'm not going to really go into all of that because you'll be hearing more about it, but what I liked about this meeting was the Library Commission has been really trying to find a way to be a useful part of the library system, both to you all and to the staff. And I think this particular meeting was good because we actually had Janice and 2 of the regional managers at the table with us talking about the complexities of what it means to have community-led programming. We already know about the library staff initiatives on programming, and they're obviously very well qualified to do that. But they know they're reaching an audience already. How do we reach audiences that we aren't yet reaching, and how do we draw the community in to help provide some of those programs? It's a very complex topic, and it was gratifying to be able to have a real give and take. I felt like the commission actually provided a good sounding board and some brainstorming for the staff. We actually had some community members there as well. It sort of got into a good community-wide discussion, and I hope that the commission can continue in this kind of use for the library system as a whole. At both of the meetings, of course, we continue to track the projects with the Measure S funds, and the only other sort of administrative item to report to you is that 2 of our members resigned Ellen Campos from Scotts Valley, and unfortunately Barbara Gorson from Capitola. And both of them, those terms were coming up anyway in April 2019. We have the Supervisory District 1 seat is also coming up in April 2019. So we're too short right now. All of these need to be filled by April. At our February 11th meeting, we'll elect officers for 2019. So with that, yes,
When is your next meeting?
February 11th.
Okay. We'll have an appointment for you in Capitola.
I should have thought of this before, but if it's okay with you, I would love to send a thank you letter for the board members who are leaving and have the JPA president sign that, if that would be okay.
Yeah, that'd be beautiful.
Will you make sure, Yvonne, that we get those thank you letters out?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, are there any other questions? No? Thank you, Martha.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
If there's a member from the public that would like to address this, feel free to come up.
Yeah, I'm still curious about unsure of how to bring issues to the Library Advisory Committee or Commission. They only meet quarterly, and I'm still not sure what kinds of things the public can ask to be on their agenda. Is it programs? Is it policies? It's kind of vague, so I'd like to know that. Thanks.
I think it's very much like the JPA board and its programs and policies. But their role is advisory. So all you have to do is call and I'll run it past the chair.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. All right, any comments by the board members? Didn't see any, okay. Moving on to consent calendar. Is there anyone on the board that would like to pull an item? Okay, seeing none, is there any member of the audience that would like to pull an item from the consent calendar?
May I make a comment about one
Yes.
thing? And we've closed the Capitola Branch Library and moved those services to Aptos and Live Oak. I was actually expecting to see a decrease in our statistics, particularly in circulation, and we did not. And I was very surprised by that. I think it's really important at this time that we try to maintain our ongoing customer base. And so I was really thrilled by the statistics. I also think as we get our arms around programming, you're seeing some increases in our programming numbers and our community room use numbers. So I'm glad to see the statistics stabilizing and turning around a bit.
Thank you, Rebecca. Jamie?
I guess I just wanted to talk really quickly about the grant, accepting the grant.
Okay.
So the item on the consent calendar is to accept a $5,000 grant from the California Humanities.
Right.
My only comment would be that in general, what we do in Capitola is we have a threshold that if we have a grant for a continuing or existing city program under, I can't remember if it's 25,000 or less, that the city can just accept it. If it's for a new thing, if someone were to come along and say, well, give the city $10,000 to run a drone fleet or something, then that would be a new program that I would take to the council for authorization. But my suggestion would be, I think you could consider potentially to alleviate the need for this sort of thing, a process whereby you can accept grants for continuing programs, and if it's outside the work plan, they come to us, and then maybe there's an annual report on grants or donations received or something along those lines.
And do you
Just to
think-
simplify the workload.
Do you think a $25,000?
I would be comfortable with that. I'd be comfortable with that as a starting place for the conversation.
We'll write that up for the February just so that we enact that as sort of a policy.
Yeah.
And
Because I understand as the director, you're probably do I have the authority to accept this or not, but just to clarify that, because I don't think,
that would be nice.
yeah, for things that we're already doing and kind of
So we'll
within.
bring that back in our policy language for us for consideration.
And kudos for everything.
Okay, I did not see anyone from the public wanting to pull anything. Any other comments by the board? All right, can I have a motion, please?
Move to approve the consent
Okay,
calendar.
move to approve, second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Seeing none. Moving moving on to general business, we have 4 items. First item is A, and determine annual meeting schedule, which is quick.
We're trying to get to that page. We have to make the adjustment that we need for the LFF.
Correct.
February 7th.
151.
Thank you.
So we're still, same
Moving it.
date, with the recommendation is February 7th, 2019.
As a question, do you get any feedback about the morning versus evening meetings? I mean, I think early on, we got, like, before we ever had these meetings, we got a little bit of feedback, but I haven't seen anything in several years. Do you?
I have not received anything about morning and evening schedules.
Okay.
Are you proposing any changes or just asking? the
I was
question?
just asking a question if, you know,
Okay.
if our schedule was good the way it was, kind of bouncing back and forth, or if people were objecting to it, but I'm fine with it as it stands.
I don't have any changes at least at this time. Okay.
We expect in 2020, we will add Felton and Capitola to the locations.
Correct.
Definitely.
Well, we can be that. All right, move to approve the.
Okay, is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item? Okay, bringing it back to the board.
Move to approve the.
All right, second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, opposed, none? All right, so that date is February 7th. Okay, moving to item B, patron data privacy policy, Susan.
This is the first draft of a confidentiality of library records and patron privacy policy. It basically incorporates our old patron policy, but what it tries to do is spell out to the public what data we collect, where we collect it, and how we use it. This is still going through a consultation process, so I do suspect some changes. But I wanted you to get a look at it and make sure you had some time to express any concerns with the idea that we'll bring it back in February for approval.
And is this, when you say consultation, is that internal? Is there an external resource that's helping you navigate through this?
Attorneys, and we use the American Library Association.
Are there any questions from the board for Susan on this item? Understanding that this will come back with some more refinements to it. All right, is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this? Okay, Jamie.
So I'm fine with this. You know, the one, this is a conversation Susan, you and I have had offline frequently, is I'm a frequent user of the digital resources that the library offers, and I'm always struck by how I go on Amazon, which doesn't have a privacy policy like this, and they do such a good job of suggesting my next book for me. And I would happily opt in to have the library make those kinds of suggestions for me, but within obviously the software, and I don't know, you know, the library software that we use to check out books digitally isn't maybe as sophisticated as what Amazon uses, but nevertheless, if there was a way to have an opt-in to enhance that kind of thing for those of us that are more of the digital users, I would gladly do it as just one user and a board member. And I don't know if it would be incorporated something like that into this policy down the road. Just saying.
In the library world, we call it a discovery layer, which allows sort of individualized counts and record keeping. We are doing an evaluation this year on discovery layers. They're expensive, and the maintenance are expensive. The maintenance is expensive, but we need to consider it, I think, to stay relevant in our marketplace. And so we're doing the evaluation right now, the sort of the state-of-the-art project, our state-of-the-art software is about $50,000 a year.
All right.
But I think it's something we need to consider if considering the size and scope of our library system. I think the expectation of our users are there for those kinds of features. We have been doing some internal programming. There is actually an opt in box where you can at least track what you've checked out, print-wise, but not digitally. And so, there's just a lot of limitations right now. I am sympathetic to what you're saying. It's been very difficult in library world right now because we are purchasing so many third-party vendors and providing them patron data. And there are huge issues. You know, I'm sure all local governments facing this. But I will take your concerns. I know Lynn's here. We're doing that evaluation this year, and we'll keep talking about it.
Well, I appreciate that you're looking into it, and it would be nice to not have to go to Amazon and see what they're suggesting, and then go back to the library app and see if it's available here, and then bouncing back and forth. And I really, I'm glad you're looking at it, and I appreciate the difficulties, the nature of the ask.
Discovery is really important to what we do.
It is.
So we'll be bringing that back.
Okay, so this was for information only, so no action at this time. Okay, library security plan. So page 162.
Here, I don't know if you want to come forward. There's been changes in the city's approach to security and the downtown campus. They have dropped their first alarm contract. Honestly, we were getting a great deal by partnering with the city, probably too good of a deal. With their removal of their portion of the contract, for us to maintain the kind of coverage that we've had will cost about $80,000 a year. And we're asking you to approve that in our budget. We have significant unrestricted balances beyond our reserve, so we believe that we can cover it because this is a contract. We can evaluate it annually.
And so you're moving from 55 hours to 330 hours. And then are those primarily during a certain time frame?
6 a.m. to, 6 a.m. to, I thought it was 8:30 p.m.
It is now that we've adjusted our hours.
And then is this an adjustment, or is this something that you're looking to absorb into your budget?
I would like to get it approved by the board, so that makes it an adjustment, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah. I just didn't see that language, so I just wanted to ask.
But moving forward, it won't be a budget.
We'll bring it back as
We'll
part
bring
of our
back as part
budget.
of the, no, it's going to budget.
Again, we are in constant conversations with the city about the approach, so.
And it seems like you're seeing a really impact as a result of continuing on with this service.
It has made a difference for the library significantly. We're still wanting to monitor the closure of the River Street camp. A lot of the people experiencing homelessness in our community right now don't have day options, and so then we become that. And they're honestly, everyone's welcome in the library. It's just that when we have large numbers, there are behavioral issues.
Are there any other questions on this item from the board? None? Okay. Is there anyone from the public that would like to comment on this item? Yes.
Yeah, I think it's important to have security there in the library on a consistent basis. I know I work in Watsonville, and, you know, it's sort of on and off, you know, for staff, you know, that we have somebody there. It's important. And a little bit beyond this is another security issue that I'm wondering about. What about theft detection systems within the library? I'm not sure if they got rid of that, you know, those gates that you go through with the magnetic strips and the materials. Because I want to protect the money, you know, what we're spending on library materials. I don't want them to just be walking out the door. So is that something the board needs to, you know, discuss or fund? And the same would be true of security cameras within the library and the new renovations that are going on. Are those going to be installed, or is that a discussion that needs to happen?
I want to be sensitive. These are things we're talking about all the time. And I prefer not to talk about the adequacies and inadequacies of our security systems in a public venue. And I understand the Brown Act, and I will do what is necessary. But I have tried very hard to go not go on record about the adequacies and the inadequacies of our security system. So I look to you for how you would like me to handle that.
Well, the item on the agenda is about the
Right.
security guards.
We certainly could, if there's interest in the board, to bring this item back for further discussion, but I think we need to focus on what we have before us today.
Thank you.
So anyone else on this? All right, with that, we'll bring it back to the board. Is there further comments or if someone would like to provide a motion?
Move to approve the
Okay,
recommendation.
Martine, second please.
Second now.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, and the next item, jurisdictional lease discussion.
This is gonna be brief. We keep having this ongoing conversation about creating leases between the jurisdictions and the JPA. I think we've come to a point where we need to begin to have a discussion with the Friends, and I just wanted to give you a heads up because you may get some feedback, particularly around gifts that are given by Friends groups, whether they're given to the jurisdictions or whether they're given to the library itself. And the recommendation I'm making is that things that are attached to the building actually be given to the jurisdictions and approved by the jurisdictions. So like the patio at the Scotts Valley Library fundamentally changes the physical infrastructure. If the library ever moves out, the library will not take that with them. And so my recommendation under this lease agreement is we create a philosophy that things that are attached to the building, lighting, then are approved by the local jurisdictions and owned by the local jurisdictions. But that things that are loose, shall we say, you know, a piece of art, a children's interactive, those things be owned and managed by the library through the Joint Powers Board. Jamie, you and I have had some off-sites conversations about this. I think this gets into some of our governance struggles, and I think it's really important that we bring the Friends group along so that we have clear understanding about roles and expectations. So my next step really is to go and meet with individual Friends groups so that I can explain what my proposal is and why I think that from an administrative standpoint we need to move that direction. I didn't want to surprise you because I suspect you will get some pushback by some of your local Friends group. I think the most recent incident was the TV wall at the Scotts Valley, which has failed. And so whose job is it to replace it? And can the library replace it with something different? And I think it's just a really good opportunity to use that as an example for how we discuss about how we move forward, because we're getting a lot of gifts and we're going to have appropriate expectations within the community about sort of the long-term approach of that. So I'm not asking for anything, I'm just saying that you may get some pushback.
And is your goal to try to identify kind of a bucket of items that can be pretty much as streamlined as possible across branches without as much disruption as possible, but understanding that there could be a couple of nuanced things because of the uniqueness of each branch?
And I just want to say that in all of these, that you never want to make a funder unhappy. Honestly, if someone's giving you a gift, there's plenty of incentive to try to work with a local jurisdiction, the local Friends group, and the person who's given you a gift. But I think it's really important that we clarify roles and expectations. I'll give an example from my last library where someone gave a quilt and it aged and sun, and we really don't have we didn't have a process where we say the quilt's coming down and its life is ended. And we really need to be able to do that with gifts. At the accession, thank you, policy. And so the library actually has a lot of these policies on the books, but I think we need to talk to the Friends about what is subject to those policies. And I also think that in the future, as Friends groups suggest modifications to the building, we need to set up this expectation that the jurisdiction has to approve that.
I have one more process question.
Okay.
So I understand you're gonna be having conversations with the Friends. There was a subcommittee. Will this be coming back to the subcommittee before the board, or would it be a check-in, or what do you envision?
I think after this particular phase, what we will do is go back and then actually, we have a draft, but try to put the draft together and get it to the JPA. I would love to have those leases approved prior to first quarter 2020. So especially as the new and remodeled buildings begin to open, that we have that same expectation.
Okay, and not to jump the gun, but I do know that part of that lease discussion will include ongoing maintenance, and I think it's important that we have a subsequent conversation on the implications of that and how that impacts the budget, because for me it's a huge concern. It's a great thing that we want to own that, but we also need to talk about the realities of it, so.
And we have, Kira, as part of our budget process, has begun to do some analysis of what we think the long-term maintenance requirements are going to be, and potentially, my hope is to put together a proposal where we phase into that. There's a revenue implication as well, and we've been talking to the county about doing some projections, because I think that MOE funds after the end of the 5-year agreement will be a source of funds to help us look at these issues, and that has implications for the city of Santa Cruz, which we've also begun to discuss with Marcus and Martine.
Talking about this nuance of gifts that structurally change a building, such as patio or lighting, would be accepted, given to and owned and managed by the jurisdiction. I think that there's sort of two kinds. I mean, so let's just say hypothetically Capitola gets open, and let's say we didn't have the top lot, for example. I think it's a good example. And in 3 years after we open, someone comes along and says, I'd like to give the city money for a tot lot at the library site because there's room. That seems like that would be a city thing. We would accept that, and it's not a library thing. We would manage it, right? Somebody comes along though in 5 years and says, you know, some of the library needs have changed, and says, hey, I'll give you money to convert one of the study rooms into a recording studio, which involves $100,000 worth of alterations to the building and creates this sort of recording studio within the branch. It feels to me as if the library would need to say, yes, that's something that we want as a library, and it wouldn't be up to the Capitola City Council to say, hey, thumbs up, recording studio at the library, we're gonna own and manage it. Like, it seems like that sort of, so
There's both.
Yeah.
But I do believe that in the
For
case
certain
of
kinds
a
of
recording,
things, depending on what the expectation is about who's gonna be taking care of it and operating it and maintaining it and how it affects the actual operations of the library.
I think that's a really good point, Jeannie, and part of the conversation is to get into some of the details of this. I would never just want the jurisdiction to approve that. I would want us to both. I think the example is in Scotts Valley, where the budget was really tight on Scotts Valley, so the Friends group after the fact made some significant modifications to the building, and I just want to have those modifications approved by the jurisdiction as well, considering that the JPA does not. And so maybe it isn't either or, maybe it's in those cases both.
Yeah, because I don't think that it would be okay for one of the jurisdictions to simply say, hey, you know, we're going to build an amphitheater next to the library, and Susan, by the way, you take care of it. Here, that's.
Thank you. I wouldn't like that.
But even I think if the expectation wasn't financial, just in terms of impacts to operators and things like that, there should be that consultation.
Right, right. Even if it was like, we're gonna operate the amphitheater,
Right,
so
yeah.
the parking lot's never gonna be full. So,
Right.
so it seems like, you know, the things that structurally alter the building maybe do need to go through the local jurisdiction, but there needs to be, if there's impacts to the library, it's the library site, it's leased to the library needs to, board, director need to weigh in.
Yes.
It sounds like that the development of this policy is gonna need to be somewhat fluid in nature and a little bit of trial and error.
And I think we'll have, I would love to have a similar lease, but the truth of the matter is I think we'll have attachments that relate to the tot lot at Capitola or to the special rec district lease at LaSalle. There are some exceptions, but what I'm trying to do is create a fair playing field for all the jurisdictions to be treated in a similar manner.
With respect to the art-related policies, I don't know if you talked to Toby over at our arts coordinator, because we do have a bunch of like arts decommissioning policies and things like that might be a resource that we haven't done that.
And for me, the struggle I have with the art is, and the people have, or the jurisdictions have inventories too. So is the art owned by the city and subject to the city's processes, or is the art owned by the JPA? And I just think that that's a really fundamental and important question.
Well, and also with respect to art, there are other regulations and laws that apply that really limit when you can remove and or modify art, and so there's all kinds of sort of legal things that you have to do to ensure that there's consistency, that you got to get the artist approval. If you don't do it a certain way ahead of time, then there's things that come into play. So that area is a bit of
the 1% for art, but then there's also pieces where a friends group might buy the lions for the library. So, and part of my question is, does the library have the authority to move the lions or take them down?
Well, hypothetically, let's just say in one of the branches, if a giant eucalyptus thing showed up called Many Feet that was placed in the middle of the library, and it lived there for how many years?
Many years.
Many years, and nobody knew where it came from, how it got there, or where it was ever going to go. It could pose problems, right? Completely hypothetical, of course.
well, and I'm thinking too, like if somebody wants to do a mural in one of the buildings or some kind of statue or something like that, then there's some.
So I gotta incorporate that too.
Anyway, Beth is a really good resource on that. They're always dealing with art work.
And I think the friends are a central part of this discussion, which is why we need to move to that level. Thank you.
Are there any comments from the public on this item? Seeing none, and just item for discussion, so this will come back. Okay, that takes us to scheduled upcoming meetings. So we know that we will be meeting on February 7th in downtown. And with that, we're adjourned to closed session. Thank you.